Our family ranch sits on 80 acres of rolling hills that have been in our bloodline for 5 generations. The main house, built by my great-great-grandfather in 1923, has weathered countless storms, both literal and figurative. But it is the barn, that magnificent structure of hand-hewn oak beams and weathered red siding, that truly stands as the heart of our property. Every plank tells a story of harvest seasons, of horses born and raised, of century-old traditions preserved against the relentless march of so-called progress. Grandpa Joseph, now 78 years old, still works the land daily with hands that resemble the very soil he tends. His face, deeply lined from decades under the sun, carries the quiet dignity of a man who measures wealth not in dollars, but in the health of his land and the strength of his family bonds. I moved back to the ranch 5 years ago after my time in the city proved that concrete and glass could never replace the soul-deep connection to the earth I had grown up with. Duke joined our family 8 years ago as a German Shepherd Malamute mix puppy. Grandpa trained him personally in the traditional way, not as a pet, but as a working partner. Duke learned to patrol boundaries, to distinguish between welcome visitors and potential threats, and most importantly, to contain rather than attack. He grew into a magnificent animal, 90 pounds of muscle and intelligence with amber eyes that seemed to assess everyone who set foot on our property. For decades, our ranch existed in peaceful isolation. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles down the dirt road, and everyone respected the unwritten country code. Mind your business, help when asked, and never, ever trespass. Then 3 years ago, everything changed when Hillcrest Development purchased the adjacent 300 acres of what had once been the Johnson farm. The bulldozers arrived seemingly overnight. Within months, the gentle slope that had once grown soybeans and corn was transformed into Whispering Pines Estates, a collection of 50 identical luxury homes with manicured lawns and cobblestone driveways. The development company promised potential buyers an authentic rural living experience with all modern amenities. The houses sold quickly to wealthy city people seeking weekend country homes. At first, relations were cordial. Several new residents stopped by with store-bought pies and enthusiastic questions about country living. They took photos of the sunset over our barn, exclaiming about the rustic charm and authentic aesthetic. We answered their questions about well water, septic systems, and local wildlife. Grandpa even helped a few with advice about gardening in our particular soil. The trouble began 6 months after the last house was completed. The Whispering Pines Homeowners Association formed with alarming speed and efficiency. Their first act was to establish a 78-page rulebook governing everything from acceptable mailbox designs to the precise height grass could reach before requiring mowing. Their second act was to hire a full-time, neighborhood standards enforcement officer. That spring, I noticed cars slowing as they passed our property. Drivers would point at our barn, at the tractor parked beside the house, at the stack of firewood Grandpa maintained year-round. The friendly waves became curious stares, then disapproving glances. One Sunday morning, a woman in a white SUV parked on the county road and photographed our property for nearly 20 minutes before driving away. "They do not like what they cannot control," Grandpa observed as we watched the vehicle disappear around the bend. "And they cannot control what they do not own." His words proved prophetic. 2 days later, we received the first letter from the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. The seeds of conflict had been planted, and we were about to discover just how far some people would go to impose their vision of perfection on land that had never belonged to them. The envelope arrived with our regular mail, its official appearance immediately setting it apart from the usual bills and farming catalogs. Thick cream-colored paper bore an embossed pine tree logo, and the words Whispering Pines Estates Homeowners Association in elegant green script. I brought it to the kitchen table where Grandpa sat drinking his morning coffee. "What do those suburbanites want with us?" Grandpa asked, taking the envelope with a skeptical expression. He opened it carefully, unfolding the letter inside and adjusting his reading glasses. "Notice of aesthetic violation," he read aloud, his voice starting soft but growing increasingly incredulous with each word. "The Whispering Pines Estates Homeowners Association has determined that your property at 1423 County Road 7 contains structures and elements that negatively impact the aesthetic harmony and property values of our community." I leaned over his shoulder to scan the rest of the letter. It contained a detailed list of alleged violations, including deteriorating barn structure visible from community roads, improperly stored farm equipment, excessive outdoor storage of natural materials. They meant our firewood and uncontrolled vegetation growth, our natural wildflower meadow that had existed for generations. "This has to be a mistake," I said, taking the letter for a closer look. "We are not even part of their development. Our property predates theirs by a century." Grandpa removed his glasses, placing them deliberately on the table. "No mistake. This is step one. I have seen this before." He tapped the signature line where Mrs. Patricia Keller, Community Standards Officer, was printed above a flourishing signature. "They buy their little slice of country living, then want to remake everything around them to match the picture in their heads." We decided the letter deserved no response. Our property was not under HOA jurisdiction, and acknowledging their authority by responding seemed unnecessary. The letter found its proper place in the kitchen trash, and we returned to our regular routines. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived, more forceful than the first. This one referenced Community Bylaws Section 47B and Aesthetic Impact Radius Regulations, claiming that properties within visual distance of Whispering Pines were subject to community standards enforcement to maintain area property values. Again, we discarded it. 2 days later, our landline began ringing during dinner hour. The first call, Grandpa answered. "Hello, this is Patricia Keller from the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. We have been attempting to contact you regarding significant violations on your property." The voice through the receiver was crisp, professional, and carried an unmistakable edge of authority. "Ma'am, our property is not part of your development. We have no contract with your association." Grandpa's response was equally direct. "That is a common misconception, Mr. Harper. Your property falls within the aesthetic impact zone of our community and is therefore subject to our exterior appearance standards. We would like to schedule a consultation to discuss bringing your structures into compliance." Grandpa's response was simple: "No thank you, good evening." He hung up the phone and returned to his pot roast. The calls continued for another week before abruptly stopping. The silence lasted exactly 5 days before the next escalation. I was repairing a fence near our eastern property line when I spotted the white SUV with Whispering Pines Estates Community Standards emblazoned on its door in forest green lettering. It pulled onto our gravel drive and rolled toward the house with deliberate slowness. I set down my tools and walked to intercept the vehicle before it reached the house. The SUV stopped, and from it emerged a woman in her 50s wearing pressed khaki pants, a polo shirt with the Whispering Pines logo, and sunglasses that probably cost more than my best work boots. Her blonde hair was styled into a perfect bob that did not move even in the spring breeze. "Good morning," she called with a practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. "I am Patricia Keller, Community Standards Officer for Whispering Pines. I have been trying to reach the property owner regarding some compliance issues. I remained at the edge of our driveway, not approaching further. This is private property, Ms. Keller. We have received your letters and phone calls. We are not part of your HOA and have no intention of modifying our property to meet your standards. She removed her sunglasses, revealing sharp blue eyes that assessed me like I was an item on her checklist. I understand your confusion. Many property owners initially misunderstand the scope of community aesthetics regulations. Your barn, specifically, has been identified as a structure of concern. It is visible from multiple Whispering Pines properties and has been cited in 3 separate property value assessments as a detrimental factor. Before I could respond, Grandpa appeared beside me, Duke at his heel. The dog sat obediently, watching the visitor with alert interest. "Your rules have no authority here," Grandpa stated flatly. "This property line marks the end of your jurisdiction. Do not cross it without invitation." Mrs. Keller's expression tightened. "I will leave information for you to review. The HOA board meets next Tuesday. We expect a compliance plan by then, or we will be forced to pursue other remedies available to us." She placed a folder on the ground at the edge of our property and returned to her vehicle. As she turned the SUV around, she called through the open window, "That barn needs to be either renovated to community standards or removed. The board is prepared to help with costs if financial hardship is an issue." We watched in silence as dust rose behind her departing vehicle. Grandpa picked up the folder without opening it. "They want our land," he said simply. "The barn is just their first excuse." That evening, I sat at my computer, the blue light illuminating my face as I scrolled through county property records. Years working as a paralegal in the city had taught me the value of research, and now those skills were proving invaluable. After 3 hours of careful investigation, I had compiled a folder of documentation confirming what we already knew. Our property sat completely outside any HOA jurisdiction. The plat maps clearly showed the boundaries of Whispering Pines, estates stopping a full quarter-mile from our property line. The original development permit explicitly limited the HOA authority to lots specifically platted within the subdivision. I printed everything, creating a paper trail that would become our shield against their encroachment. "They have no legal standing," I told Grandpa, spreading the documents across the kitchen table. "Their claims about an aesthetic impact zone are completely fabricated. There is no such thing in county ordinances." Grandpa studied the papers, nodding slowly. "Legal standing or not, they will keep pushing. People like that always do." He pointed to a section of the development permit. "Look here. The original plan called for 75 houses, but they only built 50. I would bet good money they have plans for those other 25 homes on land they do not own yet." His observation planted a seed of suspicion that would soon blossom into understanding. 2 days later, I ran into Bill Mercer at the hardware store. Bill owned the small cattle operation that bordered Whispering Pines on the north side. His expression brightened when he saw me browsing fence supplies. "Just the neighbor I wanted to see," he said, lowering his voice despite the empty aisle. "You folks been having trouble with that HOA bunch too." The conversation that followed revealed we were far from alone. Bill had received similar letters demanding he relocate his cattle barn because livestock odors were degrading community experience. The Jensen family on the east side had been threatened with legal action over their children's treehouse. Even old Mrs. Williams, whose family had farmed the valley since before the Civil War, had received notices about her non-compliant mailbox. "Something is not right," Bill muttered. "My cousin works for the county assessor. She says Hillcrest Development, the company that built Whispering Pines, has been buying up properties all around the subdivision, always after the owners got harassed by the HOA. That conversation led to a hastily organized meeting at the Grange Hall the following Saturday. What we expected to be a small gathering of frustrated neighbors turned into standing room only, with over 30 local property owners sharing similar stories of intimidation and harassment. Martha Williams, with her 87 years of no-nonsense wisdom, stood shakily with the help of her cane. "They told me my garden gnomes were lowering property values," she announced to ripples of disbelieving laughter. My grandson looked up their board members. 3 of them work for Hillcrest Development, the same company that keeps offering to buy my place for half what it is worth. The pattern became clear as more people spoke. Properties that refused to comply with HOA demands faced escalating harassment. Many eventually sold to anonymous buyers that property records revealed to be shell companies connected to Hillcrest Development. It was a systematic campaign to pressure landowners into selling, disguised as community standards enforcement. When we returned home that evening, I noticed fresh tire tracks near our fence line. A quick check of the security camera Grandpa had installed after Mrs. Keller's visit confirmed our suspicions. The white SUV had driven slowly along our property line, the passenger window down, a camera lens clearly visible capturing images of our barn and house. "They are building their case," Grandpa observed grimly as we reviewed the footage, "documenting what they claim are violations." Just after 9 that evening, our phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. "Is this the Harper residence?" asked a hesitant male voice. "Yes, who is calling?" "My name is Robert Daniels. I am on the Whispering Pines HOA board." He spoke quietly, almost whispering. "I cannot talk long. I just wanted to warn you. There is a planned inspection of your property tomorrow morning. Patricia Keller has convinced the board that she has authority to document code violations up close, not just from the road." My grip tightened on the phone. "She has no right to enter our property." "I know that," he replied. "That is why I am calling. I cannot stop it, but I wanted you to know. It is scheduled for 10:15 tomorrow morning. They think no one will be home because they have been watching your routines." He paused before adding, "I bought my house because I loved the view of your barn from my back deck. I never voted for any of this." The line went dead before I could ask more questions. Grandpa and I exchanged looks of determination. We spent the next 2 hours installing additional security cameras and posting fresh, "No trespassing" signs at 20-foot intervals along our property line. Each sign clearly stated private property and violators will be prosecuted. As we finished, Grandpa knelt beside Duke, scratching behind the dog's ears while speaking to him in a low, serious tone. Duke watched him with intelligent eyes, attentive to every word. "What did you tell him?" I asked as we walked back to the house under the stars. "I told him tomorrow might be a work day," Grandpa replied simply. "He understands his job." Morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of perfect spring day that normally would have found us working the east field. Instead, we enacted our carefully choreographed plan. I moved my truck out of sight behind the barn before dawn. Grandpa parked his old pickup at our neighbor Tom's place half a mile down the road. By 8 o'clock, our property appeared deserted. No vehicles in the drive, windows closed, not a sign of human activity. But appearances can be deceiving. I positioned myself in the small guest bedroom with its perfect view of the approach to our barn. Grandpa took the upstairs window overlooking the eastern property line. Duke rested in his usual spot in the shade of the old oak tree, seemingly dozing but alert to every sound. Each of us carried a cell phone with the others on speed dial. The waiting was the hardest part. Minutes stretched into hours as we maintained our positions. I found myself holding my breath at every distant engine sound, only to exhale when farm trucks or delivery vehicles continued past our drive. At precisely 10:12 a.m., Grandpa's text arrived. White SUV approaching from the east. I adjusted my position at the window, careful to remain hidden behind the curtain. The vehicle appeared exactly as predicted, moving slowly along the county road before turning onto our gravel drive. It stopped about 50 yards from the house, just where the drive forks toward either the house or the barn. Through my binoculars, I could clearly see Mrs. Patricia Keller emerge from the driver's side, dressed today in tailored slacks and a button-down shirt that seemed wildly impractical for country dust. She stood for a moment, shielding her eyes against the morning sun as she surveyed the property. Her gaze moved methodically from the house to the barn to the surrounding areas. Apparently satisfied that no one was home, she retrieved a clipboard and camera from the passenger seat. I dialed Grandpa's number. "She is here," I whispered, checking if anyone is home. "I see her," he replied quietly. "She is taking pictures from the drive, still on public access." For nearly 15 minutes, Mrs. Keller remained at the edge of our property, photographing the barn from various angles, making notes on her clipboard, and occasionally speaking into what appeared to be a small recorder. Had she stopped there, on the county-maintained portion of our drive, this story might have ended differently. But entitlement is a powerful force. Perhaps it was the apparent absence of witnesses, or maybe the years of operating without consequence had made her bold. Whatever the reason, Mrs. Keller deliberately stepped past the first "no trespassing" sign and proceeded up our private drive toward the barn. "She is crossing the line," I reported to Grandpa, my heart suddenly pounding. "She just passed the first sign." "Keep watching," he instructed calmly. "Let us see how far she goes." Mrs. Keller moved with purpose, her stride confident as she approached the barn. She paused at the large double doors, tested the handle, then continued around the perimeter. Each step took her further from legal ground, deeper into trespass. When she disappeared around the back of the structure, out of my line of sight, Grandpa's voice came through the phone. "I can see her. She is examining the back wall, taking close-up photos of the boards." Then came the sound that would change everything, the distinct metallic scrape of the small side door being opened. "She is entering the barn," Grandpa reported, his voice still remarkably calm. I nearly dropped the phone. "She is going inside, that is breaking and entering." "Stay where you are," Grandpa instructed. "It is time for Duke to do his job." Through the phone, I heard the soft whistle, not loud or alarming, just a clear signal that Grandpa had practiced with Duke hundreds of times over the years. It meant one simple thing: watch, contain, protect. From my window, I saw Duke raise his head, ears forward and alert. He rose with fluid grace, stretching briefly before trotting purposefully toward the barn. There was no aggression in his movement, no rushing or excitement, just the steady pace of a working dog with a clear assignment. "Duke is moving to the barn," I reported unnecessarily, unable to contain my nervous energy. "Good," Grandpa replied. "Now we wait." Through the phone, I heard Grandpa's steady breathing as he watched from his vantage point. Duke disappeared from my view as he rounded the corner of the barn, following the same path Mrs. Keller had taken moments before. Seconds stretched into nearly a minute of complete silence. Then it came, a sharp, startled cry that carried clearly across the morning air. Not pain, not terror, but the unmistakable sound of indignant surprise. "He has her," Grandpa said quietly. "She tried to come out the side door and found Duke waiting. He is sitting about 10 feet away, blocking her path." "Should I call the sheriff now?" I asked, already reaching for my other phone. "Yes," Grandpa confirmed. "Tell them we have a trespasser contained on our property. Then meet me downstairs. I think it is time we had a proper conversation with Mrs. Keller from the Homeowners Association." The scream that had pierced the morning air gave way to demands that echoed off the barn walls. "Call off your dog immediately," Mrs. Keller's voice carried across the yard, the professional calm of her previous visits completely absent. "This is completely unacceptable." I met Grandpa at the bottom of the stairs, my cell phone pressed to my ear as the sheriff's dispatcher took my report. "Yes, the trespasser is currently on our property," I explained. "No, she is not in danger. Our working dog has her contained but is not threatening her. She entered our barn without permission despite multiple posted no trespassing signs." The dispatcher promised a deputy would arrive within 15 minutes. I ended the call and followed Grandpa as he walked unhurriedly across the yard toward the barn. His pace was deliberate, not slow enough to be cruel, but certainly not rushing to Mrs. Keller's rescue. We rounded the corner of the barn to find exactly the scene Grandpa had described. Mrs. Keller stood with her back pressed against the weathered boards, her clipboard clutched against her chest like armor. 10 feet away sat Duke, his powerful body completely relaxed yet unmistakably vigilant. His amber eyes remained fixed on her, tracking every small movement. He made no sound, no aggressive gestures. He simply existed as an immovable obstacle between her and escape. "Help," she called when she saw us. "Control your animal, he attacked me." Grandpa surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had worked with animals his entire life. Duke has not moved from that spot. He has not growled, barked, or shown any aggression. He is simply doing what he was trained to do, containing a trespasser until the proper authorities arrive. I positioned myself to the side, making sure our security camera captured the entire interaction. Mrs. Keller's perfectly styled hair had come slightly undone, and a smudge of dirt marked her otherwise immaculate slacks, evidence of her hasty retreat when she first encountered Duke. "This is outrageous," she sputtered, trying to regain her authoritative tone. "I am here on official homeowners association business. Your property has multiple violations that impact the Whispering Pines community." Grandpa leaned against a fence post, crossing his arms comfortably. "Mrs. Keller, you passed 4 clearly posted no trespassing signs to reach this spot. You entered a private structure without permission or invitation. You are currently trespassing on private property, and the sheriff is on his way." Her expression shifted from indignation to calculation. "I will have your dangerous animal destroyed. Attack dogs are prohibited in this county, and I will personally ensure the HOA files liens against this property for the numerous violations we have documented." "Duke is not an attack dog," I explained, maintaining a calm tone. "He is a professionally trained livestock guardian. He has not touched you, threatened you, or shown any aggression. He is simply preventing you from leaving until the proper authorities arrive, exactly as he was trained to do with any trespasser." "I demand you call him off right now," she insisted, her voice rising. "This is false imprisonment." "No, ma'am," Grandpa replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "This is citizen's arrest for criminal trespass. Duke is performing a legal function, and he will remain exactly where he is until Sheriff Taylor arrives to take over." As if on cue, the distant wail of a siren became audible, growing steadily louder. Mrs. Keller's expression cycled rapidly through anger, fear, and finally calculation. "This is a misunderstanding," she offered, her tone suddenly conciliatory. "I believed I had implied permission to inspect the property based on our previous communications." "We have never given permission," I countered. "In fact, we explicitly denied your authority over our property multiple times, both in person and by refusing to respond to your letters and calls." The siren cut off as Sheriff Taylor's patrol car pulled into our drive. Deputy Mark Taylor had known our family his entire life. Grandpa had taught him to fish in the creek that ran through our back 40. He approached with professional caution, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Morning, Joseph," he greeted Grandpa. "Got a report of a trespasser." Grandpa nodded. "This is Mrs. Keller from the Whispering Pines HOA. She drove onto our property, passed multiple no trespassing signs, and entered our barn without permission. When she attempted to leave, Duke contained her as he is trained to do. No contact, no threats, just containment." Deputy Taylor turned to Mrs. Keller, his expression neutral but his posture unmistakably official. "Ma'am, did you enter this property after seeing the posted signs?" "I am the Community Standards Officer for Whispering Pines," she replied, attempting to regain her authoritative tone. "This property has multiple violations that affect our community." "That does not answer my question," Deputy Taylor replied. "Did you knowingly cross onto private property after seeing posted no trespassing signs?" Mrs. Keller's silence was answer enough. Deputy Taylor continued, "I will need to see some identification, ma'am." While Mrs. Keller reluctantly produced her driver's license, I retrieved my tablet from the house and played back the security footage. Deputy Taylor watched the video carefully, noting the timestamps that showed Mrs. Keller clearly passing the posted signs, entering the barn, and then encountering Duke when she attempted to leave. "Ma'am, you are currently in violation of County Ordinance 4.57, criminal trespass on posted property," Deputy Taylor informed her. "Additionally, entering the structure could constitute breaking and entering, though that would be up to Mr. Harper here if he wants to pursue those charges." Mrs. Keller's face paled. "This is absurd. I was performing my duties as—" "Your HOA has no jurisdiction on this property," Deputy Taylor interrupted. "The county recorder's office is very clear on that point." By now, several cars had stopped on the county road, curious neighbors watching the drama unfold. I recognized Bill Mercer and the Jensens among them. Word traveled fast in our community. "Joseph, do you want to press charges?" Deputy Taylor asked Grandpa. Grandpa considered for a moment, then replied, "A formal warning on record will be sufficient for today. But I want it clearly documented that she was informed she has no authority on this property and is not to return." Deputy Taylor nodded, then turned to Mrs. Keller. "Ma'am, I am issuing you a formal warning for criminal trespass. This will be entered into the county system. If you return to this property without explicit invitation, you will be arrested and charged. Do you understand?" Her tight nod was barely perceptible. "Duke, release," Grandpa commanded. Immediately, the dog stood and trotted to Grandpa's side, mission completed. As Deputy Taylor escorted Mrs. Keller back to her vehicle, I noticed the small crowd of neighbors had grown. Several were openly recording the scene on their phones. The HOA enforcer who had terrorized so many of them was now being walked off our property like a common trespasser. The symbolism was lost on no one, least of all Mrs. Keller herself, whose rigid posture and flushed face revealed her acute awareness of the public humiliation unfolding. This was only the beginning. As Deputy Taylor's patrol car led Mrs. Keller's white SUV down our drive, Grandpa scratched Duke behind the ears, murmuring quiet praise for a job well done. "They will not stop with this," he observed, watching the vehicles disappear. "But neither will we." The aftermath arrived in waves. The first was a barrage of furious phone calls from various HOA board members, each more threatening than the last. Legal action, dangerous animal complaints, property liens. Their arsenal of threats seemed endless. I recorded each call carefully, adding the audio files to our growing documentation of harassment. "They sound desperate," I observed to Grandpa after the fifth call in 2 hours. "Scared even. People who abuse power fear nothing more than losing it," he replied, his weathered hands steady as he prepared Duke's evening meal. The second wave caught us by surprise. It began with Martha Williams arriving at our door clutching a still-warm apple pie. "For your brave dog," she announced with a conspiratorial wink. By evening, our kitchen counter overflowed with casseroles, baked goods, and handwritten notes of gratitude and support. Our kitchen table became an impromptu community center, as neighbors stopped by to share their own stories of HOA intimidation. The Jensens described receiving fines for their children playing too loudly in their own backyard. Bill Mercer revealed how the HOA had attempted to claim his 3-generation family farm violated noise ordinances whenever his roosters crowed. "It was never about community standards," Bill's wife Ellen observed as we shared coffee. "It was always about pushing us out so Hillcrest could buy our land cheap." The third wave arrived 2 days later in the form of Melissa Chen, a reporter from the county newspaper. She sat at our kitchen table with a notepad and recorder, eyes bright with the scent of a significant story. "So the HOA enforcement officer trespassed on your property and was contained by your working dog until authorities arrived," she clarified, her pen moving rapidly across the page. "That is correct," I confirmed. "We have security footage of the entire incident." The following Sunday, the headline appeared above the fold: "Ranch Dog Guards Against HOA Overreach. Local Family Stands Against Unauthorized Property Inspections." The article detailed not only our confrontation with Mrs. Keller, but included comments from other residents about similar harassment. A sidebar examined the legal limitations of HOA authority and quoted County Recorder Helen Martinez, confirming that Whispering Pines had no jurisdiction beyond its legally defined boundaries. On Monday morning, we met with James Preston, a property rights attorney from the next county. He reviewed our documentation with growing interest. "This is not merely harassment," he concluded, setting aside the folder of evidence we had compiled. "This appears to be a coordinated effort to devalue and acquire properties through intimidation. The connection between Hillcrest Development and the HOA board creates serious ethical and potentially legal concerns." Preston drafted a formal cease and desist letter on heavy legal letterhead, demanding the HOA end all contact with our family and property. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening in the community. The security footage from our confrontation with Mrs. Keller, which I had shared with Deputy Taylor as evidence, had somehow found its way to social media. Within days, it had been viewed thousands of times, shared across neighborhood groups and property rights forums. The comments section filled with similar stories from across the country: homeowners bullied by overreaching HOAs, rural properties targeted for development, communities struggling against the homogenization of their unique character. Our local stand had touched a nerve that resonated far beyond county lines. As public scrutiny intensified, Cracks began appearing in the HOA's facade. Robert Daniels, the board member who had warned us about the inspection, called again. "There is an emergency board meeting tonight," he revealed. "They are in full panic mode. 3 members have already resigned, including the president. Mrs. Keller has been placed on administrative leave." "Any mention of legal action against us?" I asked. "Quite the opposite," he replied. "The remaining board members are desperately trying to distance themselves from her actions. The current discussion centers on how to manage the public relations disaster." That evening, as dust settled over the fields, Grandpa and I sat on the porch watching Duke patrol his territory with the calm confidence of an animal secure in his purpose. The great barn that had started all this trouble stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its weathered boards holding a century of family history. "They thought we would be an easy target," Grandpa observed quietly. "They were wrong." The official response arrived in a crisp envelope bearing the letterhead of Preston and Associates. Inside was a detailed letter addressing the Whispering Pines HOA board directly. Its language was precise, professional, and unmistakably threatening. "Our firm has been retained by the Harper family regarding ongoing harassment and trespassing incidents perpetrated by your association's representatives," it began. What followed were 5 pages of meticulously documented violations, potential legal charges, and demands for immediate cessation of all contact. "This is not merely a boundary dispute," the letter concluded. "This represents a pattern of behavior that may constitute conspiracy to devalue property for financial